I honestly feel a little guilty because whether it's the after the credits moments with Ichigo to literally starting this episode off, he has a pretty awesome moment. He's basically free following and just calling up on the phone saying, hey, it may seem a little intense or maybe a little egotistical, but just wait, hold out and daddy will come and daddy will clean up everything. And you can't deny the boy's been through a lot and he's been training and unlocking new powers to just deal the final blow. But I leave an episode like this and I'm not really thinking all too much of him. Now eventually that will change, of course, because we know he's gonna have some killer fights. But damn, Rukia versus Asnot was one hell of a fight. These are the types of moments that keep Bleach fans coming back for more, as this is like a peak shonen fight. Because it plays with psychological and visual horror to the absolute highest degree possible, because as you watch this man get more and more disturbing and pretty much eating away in the back of your mind, the visual direction, like you can tell the anime studio played a bit of favoritism here, because this was hands down the best looking fight of the core so far. Just pure gas, non-stop, pedal to the metal, and when you see Rukia's Bankai get unleashed, I mean, what a devastating nuclear force of cold blasting winds, as she herself almost gets killed by it as well. And if it wasn't for old Big Brother here holding her hand, it would have been a shattering domino effect of destroying her. That was fire. Like, there's no other way to put it, right? Now, I do have a full live reaction to today's wonderful Bleach episode available on my Patreon if you would like to see that. It's over there if you're interested. Now, there's a lot to break down, and I really like what they're doing, because one thing I really appreciate about this arc is how, when you look at characters like BG9, or in the case of this episode, Asnot, like, they're such interesting characters, right? They're not just your, like, okay, they're just your typical bad guys or anything. Like, we literally were fighting a wrestler last week. Like, there's just so much variety in both personalities, but most importantly, the fighting styles themselves are so interesting. Someone pulling out a minigun, and that's why it's kind of heartbreaking seeing him just casually get killed like some peasant, but BG9 pulling out some miniguns, or, just superstar catapults down and blasting James, like, it's so insane. And then to come into an episode like this, which is like, what the hell? We don't even know what's happening at first. We just kind of get a hand that grabs us and we can't look. I'm like, oh man, we having visions. And just creepy Marilyn Manson over here just keeps getting weirder and more intense. And by the time, the first true graphic moment of the fight happens, where it's like the stomach like rips through and it like crawls up, I'm like, what type of gutter slug nonsense am I looking at? But that is peak visual horror. Like, a lot of what I was seeing in this episode is something that I would expect to watch in a show like Dark Gathering that's airing this season. That's the type of gross, gruesome, freaky nonsense that you would see in a show like that. And the reason I say it kind of feels like they played favoritism, and I'm not using that as an insult, I just feel like there's so many elements, both from the VA direction with how they directed, obviously, Asnot's VA, because he went above and beyond. There was like 3 or 4 different vocal performances for this character in such a short amount of time. The art direction, they start off with what you kind of associate with kind of psychological horror and Eyeball kind of doing some weird things, and then it becomes 1,000 of them, and just the way it almost felt like we, similar to Rukia, were just absolutely being eaten away by fears. And, I honestly believed her at first. I was like, bro, like, apparently your fears are just not working on her. Like, she seems like a boss. I was just assuming she'll go and win, like, right away. And honestly, man, this is what I like, is that there's so much back and forth, and something I kind of said a lot of during my Core 1 videos was that the idea of, like, we win, they win. We win, they win. It's this back and forth, and you never quite know who's truly winning at any particular moment. Now, granted, when characters like Yamamoto end up dead, it's pretty easy to say who we think is currently winning. But when we're in the midst of a battle like this, it's hard to really say, because we are getting a lot of W's, but it also feels like as we keep getting W's, the worst possible person, the Quincy King, is also getting stronger, and that could mean very bad things, because as we see, every time any of them who have drank some of his blood, they end up coming back, all their power included seemingly, and that also includes our boy Ishida now. So, on one hand, one person potentially being all we need to kill to kind of set things straight, right? Like, if we were to destroy the Quincy King, in theory, like, you would remove their greatest force. But the issue is that the more of these soldiers we end up destroying, especially with how freaky or absolutely built different they appear to be, the stronger he ends up getting. And that doesn't look good, because if we end up going through all of them and we're like, oh hell yeah, we won, only to see the true final boss pop up with how many different abilities and powers, like, it could be devastating. And who knows if Ichigo's training is going to be enough. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about him, because it was nice starting the episode off. I thought he still had some training to go. Like, I mean, I knew he passed through, like, the gate and was, like, done part of his training, but I thought he still had a ways to go, and nope, I was hoping he would skydive, because, you know, when you see that giant-ass staircase, I'm like, okay, one, you're doing that for show, and two, ain't no way we're walking down all that. Like, we're gonna trip and fall at some point, so let's just start it and just jump for free-falling. And the idea of like, oh yeah, the battle started 3 hours ago and he just starts free-falling. Comedy gold, I love it. And honestly, it's kind of nice having him pick up the phone being like, hey bros, just hold out a bit and I'll be here soon. It's like, goddamn, that's some boss energy right there. And you know he was going to do some cool shit. And it's nice to see that we're going to get that sooner rather than later. But I really like what they did with Rukia's Bankai, because the idea of something being so cold, like, you know, at first she's counting like -50 Celsius, and then we get to like -200, and I'm like, oh shit, this is gonna hurt her as well. And the idea of launching that almost nuclear blast of frozenness, and then to just see how, at first I was like, oh, she's getting shattered too. But then I was like, oh, wait a second, it kind of just looks like maybe it's like an ice armor. So I was like, okay, sure, she's fine, she's just doing cool shit. No, like, literally, had Brother Nodt grabbed her hand, like, she was cracking, like, we saw her thumb almost fall off. What would have happened is that would have shattered, and it would have caused a chain reaction to go all up her body and absolutely kill her. And if it wasn't for that, like, you have an amazing Bankai, but you have to be very careful, slowly get rid of it. Like, it almost feels more like a last resort right now, because, well, yes, we're gonna have to use it in the middle of the battlefield in moments like these. At the same time, it's so easy for it to go wrong. And potentially in the middle of a fight, she might not have the ability to slowly calm it down when things are trying to kill her at a moment's notice. It's pretty crazy. And I mean, basically this episode was Rukia reminding us that she was the one who started this story in a lot of ways, right? So we may not see her all that much, but man, when she pops back up, she definitely knows how to crank up the heat, even though technically she's freezing the kitchen out. I mean, Bleach hits it every week, but it's really cool seeing the absolute variety of fights and just how it keeps propelling, like, oh man, we're screwed, to we're winning. But then when you look at the Quincy King, it ain't looking good is all I'm saying. But let me know what you thought, especially if you've read the manga, you've been waiting for this fight for years, or if you're anime original at this point like myself. What did you think? Let me know down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course ring that bell so you can get notified when I upload more videos to the channel. And hey, like I mentioned, we do have that full live reaction available on my Patreon if you're interested, and while you're there you also get a video shout out. So today we have Deandra, Pranay Sumshwar, Guzzlord, Minless, Jeff, and Durhosh. So I appreciate the support everyone. Please take care and have a good one.